Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be working with you, holding your hands to download, install, and configure 10 of the most important tools that you will need in the IT world. Either you are a cloud security engineer, cloud DevOps, solution engineer, network DevOps, network security engineer, software developer, data analytics, or project manager. These 10 tools are very important for you to install in your PC. Here are the list of what we need to do. The first thing on our agenda is to download, install, and configure Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a very powerful editor for all your development needs. Then after that, we are going to download and install Git Bash. Git Bash is an essential terminal for Git version control. The third thing on our agenda is to set the Git Bash as the default shell for Visual Studio Code. When you download Visual Studio Code, the default shell is PowerShell. There are some Git commands that you cannot run on PowerShell. So this is why we're going to integrate the Git Bash together with the Visual Studio Code so that the Visual Studio Code terminal will be using Git Bash as the shell. After that, we are going to download, install, and configure AWS CLI version 2. AWS CLI is a command line interface to interact with your AWS services. Majority of people do interact with the AWS services via the console. However, some organizations out there do not permit their employee or their contractor or vendor to interact with their AWS account via the console. They will prefer people that interact with their accounts to do that through the infrastructure as code. The fifth thing on our agenda is to create and generate AWS Identity and Access User and security credentials. This is an AWS services to manage identity, authentication, and authorization into our AWS accounts. After that, we are going to download and install Python 3 and pip 3. Python is a powerful programming language, and pip is the package manager for Python. If you want to download a package or a software for Python or a module for Python, you're going to be doing that with pip. After that, we are going to install AWS Python Boto3. AWS Python Boto3 is an AWS SDK for Python to automate cloud operations. The eighth thing on our agenda is to download, install, and configure Terraform. Terraform is an infrastructure as code for managing our cloud resources. The next thing is to create GitHub accounts, GitHub repository, and to authenticate into our GitHub with GitHub CLI. Learning how to authenticate into multiple accounts on one machine is a very important thing to know, because when you have already authenticated into your GitHub account with one account or on one machine, if you try to deploy resources in another account from that same machine, then you're going to face authentication issue. So authenticating two different GitHub accounts on one single machine is one of the complex things to do, but this video will show you an easy way to accomplish that. Finally, we are going to add, commit, and push our Terraform code to GitHub repository. This will help us to manage our code configuration with source control management. All right, so for us to download the Visual Studio Code, the first thing that we need to do is to go to our browser. Then you can just type download VSCode. So it's going to take us to the it's going to take us to the Visual Studio Code website. So you can see, always make sure that you download any application you want to download, always download it from the right source, preferably the company that produced or that created the software. So this is the company that this is the original website for the Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to click this. Then depends on the system, the operating system that you're using. So you can download for your operating system. Currently, I'm using Windows 11, so I'm going to be downloading Windows 11. So you can see it's been currently downloading. So here it is. I will wait for it to finish, and once it's fully downloaded, I'll go to my download folder. So it depends on what your default download directory is. If you have changed your default download location, you might have to go to wherever your download goes to. But my own, anything I download, go to my download folder. So that's why I'm waiting for it. This is it. It's still downloading, but immediately it finishes downloading, I will just start running it. So this is the first step: download this software. So now the software, which is Visual Studio Code, has been successfully downloaded. For me to do is just double click on it and start installing it. So as you can see that it's showing me the license agreement. All I just need to do is to follow the instruction. If I do not accept, I won't be able to go to the next level. So I have to accept the agreement, then click on next, next. So if you want a shortcut icon on your desktop, then you have to click this. Otherwise, if you don't want the shortcut on your desktop, you don't have to click this. Because I want the shortcut on my desktop. And then once you do that, just go to next. And also, if this is not checked for you, try to check this box so that you can add the Visual Studio Code to your path. Then install. All right, the Visual Studio Code has been successfully installed. So I just need to click on finish. So now if I go to my desktop, I will have a shortcut of the Visual Studio Code on my system. So, and it's automatically also launch itself. So now the Visual Studio Code is opened. So the next thing, because I already have Visual Studio Code on my system before, that is why you are seeing all of this. Otherwise, it's going to be showing new. But this is how to download the Visual Studio Code. All right, guys. So now that we successfully downloaded the Visual Studio Code, as you can see it on my desktop. So the next thing for us to do is to double click on it if it has not opened by itself. So once we double click on it, it's opened like this. So initially, if the terminal does not open, you can press, you can go to these three dots, then go to terminal, then new terminal. So this will open the terminal for you. But if you don't want to go to the terminal through this route, what you can just do, you can just click Ctrl J on your window, Ctrl J. So once you click on the Ctrl J, you pay attention to this side, which is showing the PowerPoint. So what is telling us that PowerPoint is the default shell for this terminal. The Visual Studio Code is just like your regular Notepad, but it has more features than Notepad. It can serve as a Notepad, and it can also serve as a terminal. So that's why I prefer to use this. So now you can see that we have the terminal as, the shell as PowerShell. But what I want to use, because by the time we start running some code on this, because it will be giving us error if it is not on PowerShell command. I want to be able to be running on Linux command. So that is why I always prefer to switch this PowerShell to Git Bash, to Bash. So for us to be able to use Bash here, we need to go and download Bash. So to download Bash, all you just need to do is to go to your web browser and search for Git SCM. So it will take us to the Git Bash website. So here, if it doesn't take you directly to the Git Bash website, this is the first one. Just click on this Git SCM, or you click on the download. So now that we are on the Git SCM page, all you just need to do, you will see the download, whichever system you are using, it will automatically dictate your system and it will show you the current version that you can download for your system. But if it doesn't show that, you can just go directly to under download here and just look for your own system, your own operating system. So since I'm using Windows and it's currently showing me the latest version for Windows, I'll just click on this. So now it's showing me the different setup that I can install for my system. I can install the standalone installer, or I can install the portable installer. So I will just install the standalone 64-bit, because that is, my system is 64-bit. So once I click on it, it's also going to download and it will be stored in my desktop as well. So that you will see the software, which is the Git Bash software, the download package in your download folder. So to install it, just double click on it. So once you double click on it, it's going to ask you, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? Just click yes. So once you click yes, it will show you it will have a pop out, it will pop a page for you to start the installation. So just continue clicking on yes till you finish. It's discovering that I already have Git before, because I already have it installed before, but I'll just say yes. In your own case, you may not see something like this, but whether you see it or not, just click on yes. So you can also have it a shortcut. You can also have a shortcut of it on your desktop. So if you do, just check on this on the desktop, like you add additional icons on the desktop. Then continue clicking on next, 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 then finish. Continue clicking on next till you finish. Do not change anything there. So it's going to install on our system, and once it's finished installing, then we can now start running. We can start go and use it as a default shell for our Visual Studio Code. So this Git Bash that we downloaded, you can actually use it for as your own terminal, but the purpose for it is not to use it as our own terminal. I actually want to use it along with the Visual Studio Code. So I'm not going to ask it to be launched. So I'll just say finish. So now what I need to do is to go back to my Visual Studio Code, then click on this drop down arrow. So you can see the Git Bash here. You can click on it. Then it will start. Your Visual Studio Code terminal will now be showing as will now be using the Git Bash shell. So the next time that you open the Visual Studio Code, it might default back to the PowerShell. So if you want to make the Bash the default shell for the Visual Studio Code, all you need to do is to click on this arrow, then go to the configure terminal settings. Once you click on the configure terminal settings, you can close this page for now. So just keep scrolling down. So here, this is what we want to do here. When you get to the terminal integrated default profile, which is window, you want to, and you can see that it defaults to the PowerShell. The default terminal profile on window is PowerShell. So you can change this to Bash. You can change this to Bash. But if you are not seeing Bash here, okay, here it is. But if you don't see Bash here, you can just edit. You can edit this in JSON settings. So once you click that edit in JSON settings, what you will see is that here, if you open this place on terminal integrated default profile windows, initially what will be here if you have not changed it, is going to be PowerShell. So now that we change it, it's going to be Bash. So you can either change it from the settings.json, or you just change it directly from the terminal from the settings itself. So that is all we need to do to launch it. So now that we've changed the settings, all I just need to do is to close. You have to close the Visual Studio Code, then reopen it again. So you can go to the desktop to open it, and you can also search for it here. So if you are searching for it here, just type code and it's going to bring it out. Then you can click on it, or just click on it once. Just anywhere you find it, just open it. So now that we've opened it again, I'll close the settings. We don't need it anymore. So if you press Ctrl J to open the terminal, then you will now see that the default shell is now Git Bash. So now it's not using PowerShell anymore, it's using Git Bash. So this is how to install Visual Studio Code, and also how to install Git Bash, and to use the Git Bash as the default terminal on window for your Visual Studio Code. Alright guys, now that we have successfully installed the Visual Studio Code and the Git Bash on our system, and we have configured the Visual Studio Code to use the Git Bash as the default shell. So the next thing on our agenda is to download and install the AWS version 2. So to download and install the AWS version 2, before we do that, we actually want to check if the AWS CLI is currently installed on our system. Either the version 1 or version 2 is currently installed on our system. And to do this, you will need to open your Visual Studio Code, then open the terminal. If the terminal is not open by default, just come to these three dots, click on it, go to the terminal, then new terminal. But currently I have it open, so I won't have to do that again. So to check if the AWS CLI, any version of the AWS CLI is currently installed and running on your system, just type AWS --version and press enter. If it's showing you that the command was not found, or the command not found, that means you don't have any AWS CLI on any of the AWS CLI version on your system. So you can proceed to the to install it on your system. So to install the AWS CLI, we need to go to the AWS website. So just search for AWS CLI version 2 install. So it's going to show us the AWS documentation for the installation. So open the first one and make sure that you are installing the version 2 and not version 1. So you can see this but this guide say user guide for version 2. So that tells us that we are currently on the user guide for version 2. There is version 1, which is the old version, but we are using the version 2. So this is different operating system. The system I'm using is a Windows, so I'm going to be opening the Windows installation process steps. So always read the instruction very well, because the instruction tells you exactly what you need to do. So from the instruction, I'm going to be following this instruction to install it on my system. So the first thing on the instruction is telling us that this is from Microsoft support version. The Microsoft support version is 64-bit window, and you need an admin right to the software. So both of these, my system currently meets up with the two requirements. Then I'm going to the next requirement. The next requirement is to install or update the CLI. I do not have the CLI currently installed on my system, so I'm not going to be updating, I'll be installing. So the steps to install is a download and run the AWS CLI SMI installer for Windows 64. So you can either click on it to download it from here, or you can just copy this and you put it on your system. So I'll just click to download. So it's currently downloading on my system, and just like every other software that I download, they go to my download folder. The AWS CLI version 2 software has been downloaded on our system. The next stage is to install it. To install it, double click on it, then click on next. So click on the check the box that say check the box to accept the terms of the license agreement. Then click on next, and install. So this might take some seconds or minutes for it to for all the installation process to run. So I'm going to pause the video, and once the installation is completed, then I will start the video again. All right, this installation has completed. So I'm going to click on finish. So now we've successfully installed AWS CLI version 2 on our system. All right, guys. So now we have been able to successfully download it and install the AWS CLI version 2 on our system. So the next step is to verify if the installation was successful. And to do this, what we need to run is we need to run a command, which is AWS version, and press enter. But as you can see, it's saying that the AWS command line not found. That is the error I'm getting. And the reason for this is that when we downloaded the AWS CLI, the AWS code, the AWS software was not added to the system variable of our operating system. So we need to first locate where the AWS CLI was installed, and we need to copy the entire path, then go and add it in the environment variable, which is the specific one is the system environment variable. So if you do not know what to do, you can, or if you are getting a different error apart from this, then if you go back to the AWS documentation, the one that we are following, you will see here troubleshooting error for the AWS CLI. So these are the different errors that AWS has provide solutions to. So you can look at any one of these if it's related to if it relates to the error that you are getting. As for me, the error I'm getting currently is command not found. Command not found error. So when I click on this, if you scroll down, then you will see the solution to solve a command not found on Linux and Mac OS, and here is for Windows. So I'm going to click the window because I'm using Windows. So if you look at the error message that we got, as I said earlier, the reason why we are getting that error is that the path where the AWS was installed, the location where the AWS CLI was installed, was not added to the path. So we need to get where the AWS CLI was installed. And if you read this, say by default, the AWS CLI version 2 is located in this path. So I'm going to copy this entire link. Then you can read this. These are the steps to follow to add this entire link to your environment variable. So what I just need to do is to go to my system. In the search, I'm going to type environment. So it's going to give me this edit the system environment variable control panel. So I'm going to click on that. Then in the system properties, I'm going to click on environment variables. Then there are two environment variables. We have the system environment variable, this one, and we have the user environment variable. I want to add it to the system environment variable because if you have multiple users on your system, then if you had the link to the path of the system variable, that means every user on your system will be able to run AWS command. But if you had it here under the user variable for that specific user, that means you are only configuring it for that specific user. So every other user have to configure their own too. So I'm going to add it under the system variable. So what you need to do is just to locate path, search for path, and click on it, double click to open it, then click on new and paste that link, the entire link, paste it in the new space. So you can leave the entire link like this, but you can also remove this aws.exe. It will still work. So for me, I'm going to remove that, and I only stop at AWS CLI version 2. So when I click OK, and OK. So the next step now is to go back to the Visual Studio Code and try the command again. But if you try the command again, it will still not work because you already opened this Visual Studio Code now before you do the configuration. So the best option is to close this Visual Studio Code, then reopen it so that it can sync with the configuration that you just did. So now that the Visual Studio Code has opened, so I'm just going to test it again to see if we are now, if we can get the version of the AWS CLI that we downloaded and installed. So I'll still run the same code, AWS version, and this time I'm expecting it to return the version that I installed, and this is the version that you are seeing here. So at this point, we've been able and successfully download, install the AWS CLI on our system. So the next step that I will show you is how to configure this. Because if you start typing AWS command line, for example, AWS S3 LS or things like that, it will not work. So, and the reason why it will not work is because we have not configured the AWS CLI to be able to talk to our AWS account. So we need to provide the CLI credentials. So in the next video, I will show you how to get the credential and how to configure it so that when you type any AWS CLI command in your terminal of the Visual Studio Code or any terminal on your system, it will be able to send requests and get response from your AWS account. Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, I'll be showing you how to configure your AWS CLI using AWS access key and secret access key. To do this, we want to first go to the AWS documentation. So go to this AWS documentation. The link will be in the description box. Now that we are already on the documentation, so go to the config the AWS CLI, and if you scroll down in the config settings for the AWS CLI, there are multiple or different ways that you can configure your AWS CLI. But the one that we're going to be looking at today is command line options. So if you open these command line options, if you go to how to use command line option, if you copy any of this command and run it currently, it will not work. It will give you permission error because currently the CLI do not have permission to deploy or create or manage anything on our AWS account. Before we can use the CLI to manage, create, or deploy anything on our AWS account, we need to grant it access, and we grant the access through access key ID and secret key. So to generate the access key ID and the secret key, you go to your AWS account. Under IAM, click on IAM. Under IAM, you want to go to user and create a user. So I'm clicking on user. Then once you're on user, if you want to generate security key or credentials for a user that's already existing, you can just select the user. But if you don't have the user already created, you can go to create user, then provide a username. So for this, I'm going to provide cloud admin. Then click on next. Then this user, we need to grant it access. And the way to grant it access is by attaching policy. So I'm going to attach already existing policy directly to the user. So we have a list of policy that is already made policy that we can add to the user, but I will be adding the administrator access. And the reason for this is so that I will be able to run any command in the AWS CLI without permission issue. In real life scenario, you don't want to add administrative access to a user, especially if the user is not an administrator. You always want to grant access to a user using the principle of least privilege, which means you only grant permission or access to the resources that a user need access to. That means you grant access based on need. So now that I've selected this, the next thing is to click on next, then create the user. Creating the user, we only give the user username and password. We cannot use username and password to configure the AWS CLI. We need credential like access key ID and secret access key. So to generate access key ID and secret key for this user, we need to go to the security credentials. When you get to the security credentials, scroll down under access keys. This user currently do not have any access key. That is why it's showing 0. A user can have maximum of 2 access key at the same time. So to create an access key, click on create access key, then select the use case. Because we want to create an access key for the command line interface, I'm going to check the first one, then click on confirm, then next, create access key. So now I have my access key and secret access key. This is access key ID and secret access key. So these two information is what we need to configure our AWS CLI. So to configure the AWS command line interface, open any of your terminal, preferably Visual Studio Code. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, you can watch our video how to download, install, and configure Visual Studio Code. You're going to see it under the settings playlist on our channel. So here, now that we have the access key ID and secret access key, here we need to type AWS configure. When you type AWS configure and press enter, it will request for the access key ID that we provided, that we generated. So we need to go back to the AWS website, copy the access key ID, and paste the access key ID here, press enter. Then the next one, which is the secret access key, copy it as well. So it's requesting for secret access key. So paste the secret access key as well, press enter. Now the default region name. So I'm going to be using US East 1, which is the primary default region. Then for the default output format, I'm going to be using JSON. If you don't want to use JSON, you can use table or you can use text, but JSON is always the best option. So when I click next, when I press enter, it's going to now our Visual Studio Code is configured. So if you want to test this, you can run AWS S3 LS. If you have any S3 bucket in your AWS account, it will list all the S3 bucket that you have. But if it doesn't list anything, possibly you don't have any buckets. But if you are sure that you have a bucket and it's not listing it, and it will surely give you the reason why it's not listing it if it does not return empty. So possibly you don't have permission. But as you can see, I have only one S3 bucket named Terraform State 2024 CI/CD. So if you go to my AWS console under S3, you will see the S3 bucket that that it's just listed out. So you can see I only have one S3 bucket, which is Terraform State 2024 CI/CD, and that is the bucket that is listed here. So this is how to configure your AWS CLI. But this configuration that we did is what is called default configuration. Let me show you what that means. Let me clear the screen. So if you do cat the AWS configuration, the AWS CLI, the AWS secret key ID and the secret access key that we provided is stored in a file called .aws/credential. It's stored in a file that is inside, it's stored in a file called credential, which is inside .aws folder. And if you want to access this folder, it is actually stored in your user home, your user file. So if you do cat /aws.aws/credential, you will see let me do it again. Cat .aws/credentials. Okay, sorry, credentials, not credential. /credentials. So you will see that it stored the access key ID and the secret access key in this folder. It stored it inside the folder called .aws and inside on a file called credentials. But it stored this credential as default. So if you want to run any AWS command and you do not provide the user, it will default to this. So it will automatically use this because that is the default credential. But if you want to have multiple credentials stored in your in the credential file, then you have to give each of the credential a specific name, preferably the name of the user. So example is, if I actually wanted to give this user a name during the configuration time, what I'm supposed to have run is AWS configure --profile. So with this, we can give a name to this credential instead of default. So if I run AWS configure --profile, I have to provide a name. So I can provide the name of the user that we created on the AWS, which is cloud admin. So if I press enter, it will now request for the access key of this cloud admin. So I can copy this. Let's just copy this and paste it here. Then copy the next one, press enter, paste the second one. Then the region, I'll do US East 1 as well. Then the display output, I put JSON. So now what we did now is that instead of storing this credential as default, which anybody that run AWS command line on this system will be able to use, we are giving it a specific name. So with this, you can have multiple users on the same configuration file. So if you do this, if you run the same command, cat /aws/credentials, you will now see that we have two credentials. One is default and the second one is using the cloud admin. So the way to specify the user that you want to use is by adding --profile to the command that you want to run and provide the profile name. But let's say you want to run AWS S3 LS. If you do not put any profile name, it will use this default credential to access the AWS account. But if you want to use this username, then you have to provide --profile, then provide the name, which is cloud admin. So now it's going to use this credential. Now, though the two credentials are the same, but in most cases they're going to be different credentials. So preferably in real life scenario, you don't want to have a default credential. You always want to attach a specific username to your credential. So now if I run this command, it's going to provide me the same information, which is the S3 bucket. And you can see it provides the S3 bucket. And now it's using this credential and not this one. So this is how to configure AWS CLI using access key ID and secret access key. If you enjoyed this video, kindly press the subscription button and turn on the notification bell so that when we post another video, you will be notified. Thank you. Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to download Terraform, how to install it, and how to configure it. Also, I'll be showing you how to set up the S3 backend for Terraform state file. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, to download the Terraform installer, we need to go to Terraform website. So I will just type Terraform download. So this will take me to the Terraform website, which is Install Terraform. I'm going to click it. Always make sure that whenever you're installing the software, try as much as possible to make sure that you are installing the software from the original company that produced the software, because you don't want to download virus on your system thinking that you're downloading software. All right, this is the Terraform website, and here's the configuration. So my system is Windows, so I'm going to be downloading for Windows. So I click on Windows, then this is the window installer. All I just need to do is to download the version for my window. I use Windows 64-bit, so I'm going to be downloading the 386 version. So download, and you can see the binary is downloaded on my system. So I need to go to my download folder because that is where all the binary, all my download are stored. So you can see the binary here. I just need to unzip this file by clicking on it and extract it. So I'm going to click extract. So the file is now extracted. So this file, what I just need inside this file is the Terraform application. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to cut it. Then I will go to my Windows system. I already have a binaries. But if you do not have binaries, you can create a folder called binaries. And this folder does not necessarily mean that it has to be binary. It can be anything. In fact, you can say, you can call it Terraform. So the name of the folder does not matter. Just make sure that you put it in a folder. So I prefer to put it in my window. So I put it as Terraform. Then I'll put the file here. The software in this binary. So what I need now is to click this link. Double click this bar. So you can see that the link to the folder is C drive Terraform. So I need to copy this entire path. Then go to my environment variable. Go to my environment variable. Then in the system properties, you want to click on environment variables. So I want to create a path in the system variables. You can as well do it in the user environment variable, but I will prefer to use the system variable so that if I log into another user on my system, I can still run Terraform. So I'm going to click the path. Then here, I'm going to say add new, then paste the path here. So you can see the C drive Terraform. Then I'm going to do OK, OK, OK. So now that is everything you need to download and install Terraform. So the next step now is let's go to our terminal and test or verify if the Terraform was successfully installed. So I'll be using my Visual Studio Code, VSCode, to test this. So on the Visual Studio Code, all you just need to do is to open a terminal and then type Terraform -- version. So you want to know the version of Terraform that you just downloaded. So I'm going to do Terraform -- version. So if you give me a version number, that means we successfully download and install Terraform on our system. And you can see it's giving me version 1.97, which tells us that Terraform is now on our system. So if this video is useful to you, please click the subscribe button and press the notification bell. The next thing is now for us to start using the Terraform by creating a Terraform file and start writing Terraform configuration to deploy an application on our AWS account. But I do not want those two, like the installation and the configuration, to be in the same video. So I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to create continuation where you can configure Terraform with credentials. All right, bye. So the first thing that I want to do, like most of all my video, is to get the documentation for the Terraform. So I already have that opened on my system. So the documentation website is terraform.io. So what you want to do here is to click on the registry. Then from the registry, we want to go to the browse providers. Then click on the AWS card. So we need two things here. We need the use provider and we need the documentation. So on the use provider button, I'm going to click on it and copy this provider. So I need to go back to my Terraform, to my terminal. So the first thing I always like to do is to create a folder where I'm going to store all the Terraform code. So I'm going to do make directory, and I'm going to call this Terraform, let me call it Terraform config. So I have the Terraform config. I'm going to cd inside the Terraform config. So now I'm inside the Terraform config, and I'm also going to open it using my Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to open, then I have it in my, here is it, Terraform config. I'm going to open it. So you can see we have the Terraform config here, but currently I'm going to say yes, I trust it. I trust the author. But currently there's no file inside the Terraform config, so we need to start creating file in there. So the first file that I want to create is called, let me go back to the terminal. I actually like creating my file using terminal. There's no anything attached to it, but I just prefer it that way. So to create a file inside the Terraform config, I'm going to do search. And I actually like using Terraform, command line to create file, because I can create all the file I want to at the same time. So I need a file called Terraform, I need a file called provider.tf. Then I need another file. If you want to create multiple files, you can list all the files together and just press enter, and all of them will create. And if you want, you can be creating them one by one. Right? You can see when I say Terraform provider, you create the provider file. So if I want, I can also do. I also need a main file, which is called Terraform.main. I need a variables.tf. Then I need an output file. That's output.tf. Then the last one is Terraform.tf So those are the files that I need for this configuration. So when I press enter, then it creates all the file at once. So the provider that we copied earlier, I'm going to open the provider file, and I'm going to paste the provider in there. So that is the provider configuration. So the only thing I just need to add to this provider is to add my region, which is the region, my default region, which is US East 1. So everything about my provider is completed for now. Then the next thing that I also want now is to configure, to start creating Terraform. So once I put the provider, then I want to run Terraform. I want to initialize Terraform so that Terraform can start using this file, or can know that, okay, this is a Terraform file. So I'm going to do Terraform init. So I'm initializing this file as Terraform, this folder as Terraform folder. So when you type Terraform init, Terraform is going to generate a file called .terraform, a folder called .terraform, and it's going to store it inside the main folder here. And it's also going to download or lock the version, so that it knows the version that you're using. Should in case Terraform has a new version in future time, you have to stay on the current version, otherwise you need to upgrade to the new version. But as you can see, when we ran Terraform init, it generated a .terraform folder, and also a .terraform.log.hcl. So those are the two things that Terraform init generated. And now we can now say this is a Terraform folder. Before we run Terraform init, even when we put Terraform file in there, that doesn't still make it a Terraform folder. But the Terraform init now makes it a Terraform folder. So now the next thing is now to start writing our Terraform code. So to write Terraform code, I need to go back to the same file, the same page under documentation. I need to click on documentation, and these are all available documentation for Terraform, for AWS services that Terraform supports. Terraform do not have services for all the AWS services. They do not have, they don't create support or available support. They don't have available support for all the AWS services. There are some AWS services that you cannot use Terraform to deploy, but anyone that is here, then you can use Terraform to deploy them. So for the simplicity, I want to deploy an S3 bucket using Terraform. So to deploy an S3 bucket using Terraform, all you just need to do is to go to S3 buckets. So we're going to be under S3. So it's alphabetically arranged. So S3 is going to be down. So here is S3. So I'm going to open it. And as you can see, Terraform has resources. They have resources, and they also have data source. But if you want to deploy a new resources using Terraform, you're going to be using resources. So to create an S3 bucket with Terraform, I'm going to click on AWS S3 bucket command. So if you open this, if you scroll down, you see that Terraform has example usage that you can use, which all you just need to do, copy it and modify. So I'm going to copy the example usage, then paste it in my main file. I pasted it in my main file, and I'm going to just change the name. I'm going to call this my backend, or let's call it my backend storage folder. So you can use underscore backend underscore storage folder. That is my bucket name. And the tag, you can also have a tag. The tag can also be the same thing with the bucket name, but it can be different. And you can also have like environment, like name is bucket storage folder, and the environment is development environment, because it's not a production account. I'm just calling it development environment. So now that we have this, so for you to deploy this in Terraform, remember we have not configured Terraform, we have not given Terraform access key and secret access key. So if we do not provide access key and secret access key for Terraform, so that Terraform can use that to deploy resources on our AWS. So Terraform will now default to go and use the AWS credentials that we configured. If you have a credential in .aws/credentials, then Terraform will go and use that credentials, even if you do not provide any credential for Terraform. But there are multiple ways of configuring credentials for Terraform. The first option, if you want to explicitly provide credentials for Terraform, the first option is you need to go back to the provider. And in the provider, under the provider AWS, this is where you're going to add the credential. And where you're going to get this information from is if you go to Terraform itself. If you go back to Terraform, just click back, you see AWS provider. Then if you scroll down, you will see authentication and configuration. So these are the 6 ways that you can configure or you can authenticate Terraform with your AWS. So if you continue scrolling down, you will see the first usage is that they want you to provide access key and secret access key in the provider.aws. So if I paste this here, all you just need is to go to your AWS account and get an access key and a secret access key. So let me go to the AWS account. I'm going to quickly create an IAM for the Terraform so that I know that this IAM is specifically for Terraform. So user, create user, Terraform. Then I don't need console access for Terraform, so I'm not going to check that. I need to attach policy. So this time I will only attach S3 full access for Terraform. I'm not giving it the full administrative access. So Terraform will only be able to deploy, manage S3 bucket. If Terraform want to do anything that is not S3 bucket, the access will be denied. So later, if you want Terraform to be able to do something that is not S3 bucket, maybe, for example, you want Terraform to be able to create a user, then you need to come back here and give Terraform IAM access. So now we have Terraform. When I open this Terraform, I go to the security credentials. So currently, Terraform as a user do not have any security, any access key. That's why it's showing 0. So I need to create one. I'm going to say AWS CLI. You can either use AWS CLI or use third-party service, whichever one will work. I understand, but I'll just leave it on AWS CLI. That works more better for me. So I'm just going to say create. Both of them will create the same thing. So we have an access key. Then I'm going to copy this access key and paste it here. Then the second option, the second key is secret access key. Then paste the secret access key here. So now I've configured my my Terraform to be able to deploy, manage, or create resources on AWS. So now what I just need to do is from the terminal, I can do Terraform. You can see how Terraform, how my configuration does not run here. Let's say you have a lot of configurations that they just scattered everywhere. You can run Terraform empty. So now you see it shifts and it makes everything align. So that is the work of Terraform FMT. So the Terraform I want to run now is called Terraform plan. Before you deploy anything or use Terraform to deploy anything, you must do Terraform plan so that Terraform will tell you what it actually wants to deploy on your AWS account. And here, once you have a Terraform, so as we have different files, one Terraform command, once you run Terraform, Terraform will bundle or we build all of these files together and we run them as one. So this Terraform plan, we plan everything that we have in all of these files. As you can see, currently we don't have anything in some of the files except the main and the provider. So if we look at the provider, get the configuration, then go to the main and deploy and create an S3 bucket for us. So let's see Terraform plan. All right, so you can see Terraform plan is telling us that it plan to add 1 resources, it plan to delete or change 0 resources. So this is what we want to do, and it tells us the configuration as well. So if we are okay with this, then we can proceed by doing Terraform apply. So when we run Terraform apply, Terraform will now deploy the resources on our AWS account. But before it actually deploy the resources, it will still come back to ask us, are we sure this is exactly what we want to do? Then you have to confirm. You can see it's asking, do you want to perform this action? Then you have to say yes. Anything apart from yes, it will abandon the operation. Even if you type does, if you type confirm, anything that is not yes, it will abort. So for you to say yes, for you to continue, you have to say yes. And you can see here, say only yes will be accepted to approve. So even if you type Y, it's as good as you are saying no. So yes, press enter. Then Terraform will go and deploy the resources in our AWS account. And you can see I have an error here, which is okay. Whenever you have error, anytime you want to deploy something, just read the error message to understand what the problem is. I say creating S3 bucket, backend storage folder, operation error, S3 create. Then it gave us some error messages, and the error API say invalid bucket name. So the bucket name that I'm using is invalid. So the only thing I just need to do now is to go back to my configuration file and change my bucket name. And my bucket name. And one thing about bucket name is it has to be unique. It has to be unique. Nobody must have used or must currently using this name. So because it's possible for somebody to have used this name or currently using this name, so I'm going to do something. I'm going to let me change the name. So I'm just going to call it Terraform 2024 010 11 A. So for somebody to come up with this, then that might be something extraordinary. So I believe nobody will have used this name before. So let's just go back and do Terraform apply again. So Terraform has come back and it's telling us that do we confirm? I'm going to say yes. Then okay, Terraform is now creating our resources. I say apply complete. With one resources has been created, 0 destroy and 0 change. So if you go to our AWS account under S3 bucket, we should see the resources that Terraform deployed. So the resources is the bucket is this, and you can see this is the bucket Terraform created for us. And you can see the time they created it today, which is October 11. So now this is how to use Terraform, how to configure your Terraform and how to use Terraform to deploy resources in the AWS cloud. So the next thing that we want to do is if you go back to our folder, Terraform folder, you will see that Terraform has added more file to the file that we have initially. And you can see it have added a terraform.tf state and terraform.tf state.backup. So in real life scenario, you do not want to store the Terraform states on your system because the terraform.tf state file is a very, very important file. And if you delete or this file got corrupt, that means Terraform will not remember anything it has done on your AWS account before. So if you delete this file now, Terraform, and you run Terraform apply again, Terraform is going to create, we create the bucket again. That's why it has created it before. But as long as nothing happens to this file, if you try to do Terraform apply again, when you have not made any change, Terraform will remember what it has done before, and it will like, hey, I've already created this bucket, so I'm not creating it again. And you can only remember because it stored the state inside this terraform.tf state. And whenever you run any Terraform apply, you will first come to the terraform.tf state and see the previous configuration. And if what you are asking Terraform to do, it has already done it before, it will just tell you that no changes will be performed. As you can see, it said no changes because it already created this bucket before, and I do not make any change, so it has no reason to create the bucket again. So that is why the terraform.tf state file is very, very important. So what company or organization used to do is to store this terraform.tf state file in a more secure way. And one way to store it is to put this file in our S3 bucket, in one S3 bucket in our AWS account. So to do this, I just need to go back to the provider and add a backend configuration here, like backend S3, and then I need to provide the S3 information. So the first information is the bucket name. Then I have to provide the value for the bucket that I want to use. So let me go to my AWS account. I just copy one of the buckets. So I'm going to be using this bucket. Then I'm going to paste it here. Then the next thing is that there must be a key. That is the bucket key. So the bucket key is actually going to be inside your folder, inside the S3 bucket. If there is a folder there, or if you intend to store multiple state file for different configuration. Then you can create a folder and use the folder to organize your resources. Maybe this configuration, I'm going to call it dev. Let's assume that I have both my dev and my staging environment. I'm using this same account for both the dev and the staging environment. I might have a folder called dev, then have another folder called staging. Then the terraform.tf state file for dev will go inside the dev folder. So I'll go back here under the key. I'm going to do dev slash then terraform.tf state. So this terraform.tf state, this one here is going to move it into the dev folder inside the Terraform state 2024 CI/CD bucket. So this is all I need to do. This is all I need to do. Then all I need to do next is to do Terraform. You have to do Terraform init again because you are modifying the provider configuration. And Terraform will dictate that, hey, we just added this bucket. This is migration of the Terraform.tf state file. And you can say, do you want to copy existing states to the new backend? And I'm going to say yes. So it copied it successfully. So, but initially before, it's going to reject it and tell you to run Terraform dash migrate state. But I think maybe because it is a new version, hopefully they will fix that. So, but we're still seeing the Terraform.tf state here. If you open it, you can see it's empty. This Terraform.tf state is now empty because Terraform has copied the TF state inside the S3 bucket. So if you go to the S3 bucket now, just refresh, you will see it has sent the Terraform.tf state here and we have it inside the dev. So now, anytime that you want to run Terraform, then I can delete this one now because it's no useful again, and this one too can go. So anytime you are running Terraform now, Terraform will be updating the Terraform.tf state file. So this is how to configure your Terraform and also how to configure the Terraform backend, Terraform S3 backend. There are multiple ways of providing credentials. This way of providing credentials should be your last resort. Is not always the best option. It's only if there is no other means or you are just testing Terraform, like as we are testing it now, then that is when you can use this method. And the reason is, if you are to push this code in a GitHub or in any public repository and you forgot to clean or to remove the key, that means you are going to be pushing your key to a public repository, which is not always advisable. Although GitHub, if you're using GitHub has optimized their system that it will dictate that you are pushing a key and they will block it immediately. All right. So I'm going to remove the key and I'm going to save this code, and in another video I will use the entire I will use the configuration file to deploy more Terraform resources. In this video, I'll be showing you how to create a GitHub account. To create a GitHub account, open any browser of your choice. Then type in github.com. On the right hand side, click on sign up. Then type in the email that you would like to use for the GitHub account. Then click continue. Then type in the password that you would like to use for the GitHub account. Then click continue. Type in the username that you would like to use for the GitHub account. Once you type in the username, GitHub will tell you whether it's available or not. Click continue if the username is available. Then if you'd like to receive an email from GitHub, you can check in the box the email preference. But for me, I will leave it on check. Now the GitHub will verify your account. Then I'll click on the verification. Once the verification is successful, then GitHub will send an email. I mean, they've sent a code number to the email that you use. So go to the email and get the code number, then come back and enter it in on the web page. This is the code in my email. So copy the code, then go back to the GitHub page. So on the GitHub page, paste the code. Then the GitHub will automatically verify the code and they will create your account. So they will let you know if the account is successfully created or not. As you can see, my account is successfully created. So I can now log back using the new email and the password that I created. So now I've successfully logged in into my new GitHub account. So I can skip the personalization. Now GitHub is initializing my dashboard. So as you can see, I have a GitHub dashboard. All right, now that we have created our GitHub account, the next thing for us to do is to create a GitHub repository so that we can start using GitHub to manage our code. So to create a GitHub repository, click on repository, then click on new. Give your repository a name. I named my repository Terraform config because this was the name of my Terraform folder. So you can give your repository a description, but for this, because it's an optional, so I will leave it with no description. Then you select either public or private. Because I want people to be able to access this repository without permission, then I will leave this repository public. You can include a README file in your repository. A README file can help people to know how your application or your code works or how they can run your code. Then if there are some files or folder in your code that you do not want to push into your GitHub repository, then you can include them in the .gitignore. GitHub created or provide some templates for .gitignore depend on the application that you are working with. For Terraform, if you search for Terraform, you will see a Terraform template, then you can use that. I will not use any templates because I will be creating my own .gitignore in my own local system. So now that I've filled in all this information to create a new repository, the next thing is to create the repository. All right, now that I've created the repository does not have anything in it, but if you notice, the name of the repository is also exactly the name of my folder, my already existing folder. So this makes it easy for me not to clone this repository and just push the repository that I already have or the folder that I already have before into GitHub. But before I can push my already existing folder into GitHub, then I need to do some configuration. GitHub provides us some of the command to run for the configuration. If you do not have a repository before, then you can create a new repository with this command from the CLI, from the command line. But if you already have a folder that's your existing repository, then you can also push the existing repository to the GitHub using this command from the GitHub from the command line. So because I already have a repository, so I'll be using this directory. So all I just need to do first thing is to initialize my folder. This is terraform.config, is not already a GitHub file, so I will be initializing it with GitHub init. So once I initialize it, you notice that immediately it turns this folder into GitHub folder, and that is why it's appending a master branch to it. The branch of my remote repository, this repository that I created, is main, and you can check that from this repository when you log into the repository. So I need to convert my local working directory branch, which is master, into main branch. And to do that, just do git branch -m, uppercase M, then the name of the branch that you want to convert to. So I want to convert to main, so I'll do git branch -m main, and immediately it will convert this master to main. Now that I have a repository, a GitHub repository on my system, so the next thing is to link the two repositories together, which is my remote repository and my local repository. So to do that, I can just copy this entire code, which is git remote hard origin, then the link to the origin. So just paste it here and press enter. So now I've had the remote repository to my local repository. So now if I push a code from here, it will go straight into my remote repository. But before I start pushing code, there are some more things we need to do. First, we need to add all of this file and folder into our staging area. So to do that, I just need to do git add dot or git add, then specify each name of the files and folder that I want to add. For example, for the output, I can just do git add output.tf. But if I have a lot of folder, I may not want to be typing their name one by one. I can just do git add dot, and it's going to add all the files and folder into my staging area. However, there are some files and folder that you may not want to push to your GitHub repository, or you may not want to push to your remote GitHub repository. And the reason might be that either they are containing credentials or they are files and folder that can be recreated, which necessarily not need to be in your repository. So to ignore those files and folder, you can add their names in the .gitignore file. I don't have .gitignore file yet, so I need to create one with the help of touch.gitignore. So now I've created my .gitignore. I need to open it and type in the names of files and folder that I do not want to push to my GitHub repository. So the first file the first folder that I do not want to push is the .terraform, because it's a big folder that, and I don't want to push it. Anytime I need it, I can recreate it. So I'm going to add the name Terraform / because it's a folder. Then the second one is the Terraform log file, which is terraform.terraform.log.hcl. If you do not want to add the output, you can also do output.tf, but I actually want to include the output. So the best practice is to give these two the reason why you are not pushing them to the repository. So you can add a comment, and you can give your comment a well-meaning description, so that somebody that is reading your code in future time will know why you are not pushing this to your repository. So for now, I'll just do ignoring .terraform large folder. Then the second one, I will do ignoring .terraform log file. All right, those are the two files and folder that I do not want to send to my GitHub repository. So now that I've added that, the next thing for me to do is to add, let me clear my screen first. So the next thing for me to do is to start adding all my files and folder into my staging area, and I can do that with git add dot. So this has added the file and folder to my staging area. Then the next thing is to commit this into my repository. So git commit -m. Then I'll have to give the commit a message. Since this is my first commit, I'll just call it initial commit. Then add it. So it has added all the commits into it has committed all my changes. So now is the time to push this code to the repository. But if I try to push this code to the repository, two things might happen. It's either it goes successfully, or secondly, it give me an authentication error. I already have a GitHub from another account connected or authenticated on this Visual Studio Code. So as a result of that, it might want to push this repository into that GitHub. And because this file is not existing in that GitHub, then it will throw an error. So the first thing for me to do is to make sure that I authenticate my GitHub on this repository. So on this VSCode. So, but before I show you how to authenticate, let's first push this code and see what is going to happen. So to push, I'm going to do git push origin main. Okay, it goes successfully, and the reason for that is because I've already authenticated this account before. If you receive an authentication error, possibly error 403, then the next thing for you to do is to authenticate your GitHub on this IDE. So to do that, there are multiple ways, but the simplest way I found out is to use GitHub CLI. So we can do GitHub login. So when you press enter, it's going to ask you where do you use GitHub. Just pick, you can use this up and down arrow to select. So I'm going to select github.com. Then what is your preferred protocol for Git operations on this host? Then I will still remain HTTPS. Then for this credential, I'm going to say yes. Then it's login with a web browser or paste an authentication token. I'm going to be logging in with web browser. Then it's going to ask me to copy this code. So I'm going to copy the code. Then once I copy the code, then press enter on my keyboard so that it can open a browser for me. The code that I copied, I will pick sign in any of my GitHub that I want to sign to. And this is the best way of, if you're having multiple GitHub accounts, you can use this means to sign into multiple GitHub accounts at the same time. But I'm signing into my training 202. So I'm going to click continue for this, then paste the code there, the code that I copied, then continue. So the next thing for me to do is to authorize GitHub. So now that I've authorized GitHub, so that means I've authenticated my Visual Studio Code to be able to push code to my GitHub account. So this is how to create a GitHub account, how to authenticate a GitHub account, and how to push your code from your local working directory to your GitHub account. To install Python 3 on your system, first check your system and make sure Python is not already existing. To check, just type Python 3. To check, just type Python 3 on your terminal, Python 3 version. So this shows that there is no Python found on my system, which means Python is not currently on my system. I can go to the Microsoft Store to install the Python 3, or I might just go to the Python website to install the Python 3. So I prefer to go to the Python website. So go to the Python website, open any browser of your choice and type python.org. Then because my system is Windows, so this configuration will only work with Windows system. And you can as well go to the download and search for operating system of your choice. But since my system is Windows 3, Python will automatically dictate my operating system, which is Windows. So to install or to download the Python software on your system, go to download, then click download Python. We download the latest Python, which is Python 3.13.0. So as you can see, the Python is currently downloading on my system. This download will be located in my download folder. Alright, now that the Python has successfully been downloaded, the next thing is to install the Python. To install the Python, double click on the Python software, then click on install. But before you click on install, make sure that you add this python.exe to path. And you can also use admin privilege when installing it. So I will check both of them before I click on install to Python. Install now. So I will pause the video for the installation to complete. The installation was successful. Alright, now that our Python was successfully downloaded and installed, the next step is to check if the Python was successful and the version of the Python that was downloaded. To do this, go to your terminal, then type Python 3 or Python -version. So you can see we have Python 3.13.0 on our system. That means that you can start running Python. And the other thing that I also want to check is pip-version. Because when you download Python, it automatically comes with pip, which you use for downloading software in Python. Now, to start using the Python, you have to create a file that ends with .py. So to create a file, I can do search. I can just call hello.py. So in my hello.py, I can just print out a message that says, hope this video is helpful. So then to run it, I'll just come back to my terminal and say Python, then the name of the file, which is hello. So it should print out whatever I put in my terminal, which you are seeing it say hello, this hope this video is helpful. So that is how to use this is how to download, install, and configure, then use your Python. So the next thing on our agenda is to use pip to download AWS Python Boto3. But before I download AWS Python Boto3, I would like to open the documentation for the Boto3. And to do this, go to the open any web browser of your choice. Then in the address bar, just type AWS Python Boto3 documentation. This will open the documentation for the Python Boto3. Then open it. I'm going to click on the first one. So this is the Boto3 documentation. And the reason why I like to start all my configuration or installation from the original documentation is because any video especially for installation might work today, even might work in 5 years time, but the provider or the vendors of the software might come up with a new version and retire the old version, which means that the configuration for the video that you watch might not work when the new version is being used. So that is why I always try to show you where I'm getting my installation from, so that you can actually go there. Even if the configuration of my system or my video is not working, then you can actually configure using the documentation yourself. All right, with that being said, now that we're already in the Boto3 documentation, the first thing that I want to do is to go to the installation. So we're going to work with the installation, with the configuration and the use of Boto3. So let's start with installation. Click on installation. You can see to install Boto3, you are asked to run pip install Boto3. So I'm going to copy this, then go back to my terminal and paste it there. Before I paste it, let me clear my screen so that we start with a clean state. So paste it there, then press enter. So this will install Python Boto3. The installation is currently going on. We have to pause this video should in case if installation might take longer time. Now that the installation is successful, we can check if if Boto3 is installed on our system. But before I check this, I would like to go back to the documentation. So one thing that I didn't tell you earlier is that depends on your organization. Your organization might have been currently working with a specific version of Boto3 before you join them. So you might want to download the specific version that your organization is using, or you might want to limit the version of Boto3 to a specific version. So you can do any one of them by either specifying a specific version by using --, or you can use a version greater than a particular version, or you can use a version lesser than a particular version. So any one of them you want to do, you can do it with either of these three. So if you scroll down, the next thing on our agenda is the configuration of Boto3. So to configure Boto3, there are multiple means of configuring Boto3. Configure Boto3 just simply means that you want to give Boto3 the permission, or you want to authenticate Boto3 so that it can start deploying something, or you can start using it to deploy something on your AWS account. Any external application or any application, before you can use it to start talking or sending traffic or sending API call to your AWS accounts or any cloud provider, you first need to authenticate. So for AWS, the default authentication is putting the authentication in the .aws/credential file. So to do that, you can run aws-config. So if you put aws-config, copy the aws-config and go to your terminal. If you paste it here, you will see the configuration. If you have not done the configuration before, it will ask you to input your AWS access key ID. Then if you press enter, then it asks you to put your AWS secret access key, then the default region name and the default output format. I've already configured my AWS CLI before, so if I do not explicitly give Boto3 or if I do not specifically add credential as a parameter to Boto3, then Boto3 will default to come and use the configuration that I have in my .aws/credential. This is the one way of configuring your Boto3. Another means of configuring your Boto3 is by having the credential directly in the Boto3 file. To do this, you need to first generate your AWS credential from your AWS account. Once you have the AWS credential, come back to your Visual Studio Code and you need to create a configuration file for the Boto3. To create the configuration file, type touch, then give your configuration file any name of your choice. Once you create the configuration file, open it. The first thing that goes on your configuration file is the import Boto3. Once you have imported the Boto3, then on below the import Boto3, you will need to create a section. The section is what we are going to, it's inside the section that we're going to put the AWS credential. So just type section is equal to Boto3.section. So inside the section, the first credential that you want to put is your AWS access key. So to put this AWS access key, type AWS _access _key _ID. Then put the access key ID. You put the access key ID in form of string. Then once you put the access key ID, press enter. Then the next one is to put the secret key ID. To put the secret key ID, press AWS _secret _access _key. Then this also has to be in form of string. Now that we have put both our access key and access key ID, the next on the agenda is to put the region, the default region. To put the default region, type type region _name. Then this also has to be in form of string. So it's US East 1. So now that we have configured the section, we can now append these sections to any API call that we want to make from our Boto3. To make API call directly from your Boto3 file, all you just need to do is to append the section to the client. So to do this, you can do section.client, then have the open and close of a bracket. So inside this bracket, that is where you're going to put the AWS service that you want to use the Boto3 for. So let's say you want to use this Boto3 to create an S3 bucket. So inside the client, you put S3. Now that we append the client to the section and we have passed our service name, so the next thing for us to do is to put all of this service, is to save all of this service in a variable. So I can call this S3 _response is equal to section.client.s3. So now the S3 object has different methods. To see all the methods that you can call with the S3, head to the documentation. So under the documentation, go to available services. If you go to S3 under the available services, you will see different methods that you can call with the S3. So these are all different methods that you can call with the S3. You can create a bucket, you can copy objects, you can delete buckets, you can create a section. But what I just want to do is to create an S3 bucket. So to create an S3 bucket, go to create buckets. And for the bucket, there are multiple parameters that you must pass inside the create bucket object. Under the parameters, you will see different parameters that you can use with the create bucket method of the S3. So the only parameter that is required is the bucket. So if you can check other parameters, so anyone that is not required means that they are optional, but anyone that you see that is required, you have to include it in your create bucket method. So the only one that is required here is just the bucket name. So I'm going to copy that, then go to my section. So to use this, I just need to do append this section.client.create bucket. Then inside the create bucket, create bucket, create underscore bucket. Then inside the create underscore bucket, I have to put the bucket name. So you have to make sure that the bucket name that you are using is unique. So I've just formed a name called Boto3 training, Boto3 demo training 111. So now that I've successfully now that I have included all the required parameters, then the next thing for me to do is to run this code. So to run this code, just go to your terminal, then type Python, then the name of the file. The name of the file is Boto3 demo.py. So then press enter. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put comma between the I forgot to put comma after the access key, then comma after the secret access key. So now that I put comma in both the access key and the secret access key, then I'll clear my screen, then run this again. So since that I'm not getting any response back, that means the bucket name, well, I mean, that means the bucket was successfully created. So if I go to my AWS account, so in the AWS account, go to the S3, then under the bucket name, you will see this is the new bucket that I just created, Boto3 demo training 10.111. So this is how to configure your Boto3 and use the Boto3 to deploy resources in your AWS account. All right, guys, that is it. So I hope you have found this guide very helpful to set up your 2K. Remember, having the right tools does not only make the job easier, it also sets you up for success, especially when working with complex projects. Please be sure to drop likes if you enjoyed this video. And don't forget to subscribe for more tips, tutorial, and deep dive into IT essentials. If you have questions or need further guidance, please kindly leave a message in the comment section below. Until next time, keep reading and keep learning.